all of the innovation that has happened in things like social media and in search has not come by making the product necessarily better. It's come by getting more revenue out of each individual.
What I have a hard time with in financial markets in particular is coming up with a credible reason to draw the line at a particular spot, right? So is it 2x leverage is okay, but 3x leverage is not?
I think that capitalism, where the people who win and then change the rules so nobody else can win, is not capitalism.
If you ask most people, do you feel like the country is twice as wealthy as it was 4 years ago? I don't think anybody, no matter how bullish they are, would say, yes.
There's an incredible chart that I put in my weekly charts on Monday, which showed the earnings growth of tech and World X Tech. And since 2007, World X Tech is flat. Flat. And then World Tech is straight line up.
Those other podcasts, they're clickbait. This is Clickbait, the show where we market professionals click record on a conversation that we'd have anyway. Should we be doing it in public? Probably not. But we're going to prove once and for all that all we know is that we don't know nothing. Who's with me today? I didn't know her in high school, but I have a hunch she lost less homework than Carolyn Levitt's lost job and inflation's data. Our favorite anything but boring or laborious source of statistics, Cameron Dawson. Welcome to the show.
I thought that was going to be for Dave, and I thought we were doing
Switch up.
Well, don't tell his achy breaky heart that Move Over Breaking Russ Walk My Walk has become the first AI song on top of the country music charts. He's a genuinely identifiable human performer, the Billy Ray Cyrus of Clickbait.
He's saying that. Hey, no.
Can I tell you that I had a crush? I can't believe I'm saying this, but I had a speech impediment as a kid, and I couldn't say my hard C's. So I had a crush on a kid named Kyle, and I called him Tile. And I used to sing him "Achy Breaky Heart" as my like plea to have him notice me, but it didn't work.
Okay. Did you have to say sort of achy?
You called him Tile?
Tile. Well, also my name was Tamarin, so.
Well, now I'm just going to call you Tamarin from now on.
Well, fantastic. Tamarin, Dave, we're going to have a good time talking about some stuff today. The rules are we've agreed on one topic. That topic today is financial nihilism. Nobody Googles nothing while we're live, and we each have a surprise topic that we brought to the table for us to talk about, markets or non-markets related. Apparently, my wave of morning meetings and other things, I've missed some headlines. Dave, you were all excited.
I'm so excited.
Financial nihilism.
I'm so excited that you do not know this news, and I get to tell you this. So you know Robinhood, like the third horseman of the apocalypse of financial nihilism.
Not the Prince of Thieves, Robinhood.
No, Hood. HK, dollar sign. HOOD.
Either?
Will now, if you're sitting in New York and you've got your Robinhood account, you can now, on demand, use your phone and have them deliver in a brown paper bag up to $100,000 in cash on demand to your door.
Why?
Well,
what
I mean, as far as I can figure out, it's the last three markets that financialization has really not tackled yet, which is sex work, drugs, and gambling. Gambling's getting close, but we got to work on the other two. And clearly this cash system is designed to help move financialization forward.
AI is working on or OpenAI is working on the first one effectively.
The sex work part? Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, like on our path towards financial nihilism, you can now get cash on demand delivered to your doorstep by some DoorDash driver up to $100,000. They literally say in an unmarked paper bag. They say it on the press release.
Not even in like some kind of like lock bag or something?
I'm sure that it'll be like early days of weed. There'll be some little thing that a child can't get through. Mostly it feels like a lot of DoorDash guys are going to get mugged, but...
Right. I'm thinking of the John Mulaney bit about like when he's post-confession of like relapsing into drug use, where he was like, why is anybody on these cash apps that's not? I don't even know. So again, is there any market need? Have either of you needed $100,000
in cash
paper bag
at 2:00 in the morning in Manhattan? No, really never.
Is this available nationwide?
I think this is a press release. Whether this ever actually turns into a used product, we'll never know. At least I'll never know because I'll never use it. I suppose there's a world where you need $300 in cash to go on your trip tomorrow morning and you don't feel like going downstairs to walk over to the ATM. But boy, you really got to stretch to come up with an excuse that's not drugs, gambling, or sex work. At least I haven't come up with one.
It'd be fascinating to know what the fee they're going to charge for that.
That's my next question. Did they say that?
The delivery fee, and then do you tip the driver in the app or with the cash?
As a percentage? Like that's
yeah, like Uber Eats style, right? Like where you're like, this burger all of a sudden went from being a $10 overpriced burger to being like a $30 burger.
Yeah, your accidental hit on that tip button could be like, wait, my $100,000 is $120,000.
And it's gone. All right, well, that's
straight up South Park. Yeah.
This is a fascinating twist that I was definitely I couldn't even guess that. That is staggeringly weird.
It's staggeringly weird, but I mean, absolutely symptomatic of the topic of the day, right? Financial nihilism, right? The reason this is even in the mix is because everybody's out there, like, Robinhood's also trying to bolt on sports betting and everything else into that, prediction markets. It's all part and parcel.
What are you seeing about that stuff in particular? Like the sports betting markets, I think on Odd Lots maybe was Cliff Asness just talking about sports betting, and he's hinted at this in Excess Returns interviews too, where it's like they're just looking at every available data set with machine learning now and going, where else can we eke out returns? But I don't know, Cameron, like where are you in even thinking about these places or just not thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really factor into what we do. We're not going to build a portfolio with it. Is there an investment opportunity? At some point, maybe there is. I think for some people would be inclined to put some kind of ESG filter on it and say, no, that's not something we'd be interested in doing. But it's not something that for our subset of clients really makes any impact whatsoever.
But at the same time, these things do impact markets, right? That's the part where, like, I get into this argument with Eric Balchunas from Bloomberg all the time, right? Because he's very much on the libertarian side of the fence where it's like, hey, I can get on a plane to Vegas tomorrow with my life savings, put it all on black and lose all of my money in 5 seconds. And that is completely legal. And nobody would take you to court because you should not have been allowed to do that. And so his whole thing is like, of course you should have 5X, NVIDIA trading. Of course you should have prop betting on Robinhood accounts. Of course, like all of these things, like everything should be legal. And on the one hand, I can't really mount an argument against that. Like I can't really mount a moral argument to say all gambling should be illegal everywhere in the world. Like, that doesn't feel right either.
Filters and cigarettes. Like, right. Like at a certain point, like even like there's certain bounds that we put on things to say like, if left completely unbounded, it could be dangerous. I get it. Like, no, I'm not trying to argue that he's right, that it should be a free for all. What I have a hard time with in financial markets in particular is coming up with a credible reason to draw the line at a particular spot, right? So is it 2x leverage is okay, but 3x leverage is not? And is 2x leverage on NVIDIA the same as 3x leverage on IBM? Like, I mean, you can get into these sort of endless arguments where all of these things are imperfect. And yet at the same time, I do think that, Kyla Scanlon's sort of observation that we have an entire generation here who feels like prosperity is just out of reach and therefore it engenders all of these behaviors. That feels very real true. I mean, I have kids in that generation and I think they're avoiding those things, but I see it around them, right? All of my kids' friends are in sports betting and prop betting, and like that, it is just embedded in that culture at this point. Has there been any studies about if you look at a country like the UK and you go in all of these smaller towns, there's lad bets or whatever it's called, all these
Ladbrokes,
like, you have all these little mini casinos. I don't know. Have there been any studies about what the effect of like social impact has been?
Oh, I'm sure. Like we can't Google them now, but because those are the rules. Look, I'm sure that there are no studies that say it's beneficial. Let me put it that way. Like I know locally we put a casino in Springfield, Massachusetts. That was a big deal 8 years ago or something like that, 10 years ago. And a lot of those studies got trotted out around what happens to a town when casinos move in. And the reality is, yeah, you get economic activity, but you also get increased deaths of despair. You get all sorts of stuff that comes along for the ride that the industry tries to sort of push off to the side as much as they can because that's their job. So it can't be beneficial. How detrimental it is, I think, is a real question. And then there's sort of the age thing too, is right. Like the boundaries here, if you're 18 years old, basically the world is your oyster. Right? You can take out $100,000 in loans and then go gamble all of your excess away.
I wonder if there's something similar to this notion of, when we were all kind of waking up to the perils of social media, and it's like, if it's free, you're the product, right? So if the supernormal return seems free and there, then you are the product. And how much of this idea that there is this kind of scrape of people looking for more and more way to like squeeze the juice out of society, get more and more money out of each individual eyeball. I was thinking about this as well. I mean, not to turn us in a different direction, but as everybody got really excited about the AI browsers and how amazing these AI browsers are. And my first thought was, well, they are amazing because we've had the same browser for 30 years. Like Google doesn't look that different than it did when it was first launched. And obviously there's been a lot of innovation around it, right? You can text and it finishes your text and all the predictive stuff. I remember when that came out, it was like such a big deal. And they're like, we're now having to do millions more searches. But the reality is because of the monopolistic nature of search, they actually haven't had to innovate that much. So now all of a sudden you're seeing forced innovation because people are saying, wait, this is a product that actually hasn't changed. So this is how I bring it home. I was like, why was I saying this? Oh, this is it. Because all of the innovation that has happened in things like social media and in search has not come by making the product necessarily better. It's come by getting more revenue out of each individual. So it's like it's sort of similar of this nihilism is that these are not products because it's making things better. It's just trying to get more revenue out of each individual trader. I knew I had a point.
That's a great point because a conversation I had this morning, and it was with kids of like young adult child and soon to be spouse of current clients. And part of this thing that was going on, and I could just, you see the wheels turning in the head, the part that you were describing, and this is Dimitri Kofinas when he was talking about financial nihilism originally was talking about just we have the price of the thing and it's just devoid, detached, completely unrelated to it having any meaning at all. And I'm talking to this young couple and they're basically thinking about like, we know at some point it doesn't make sense for us to rent anymore and that we'll want to have a house maybe around when we get married or whatever else in the coming couple of years here. And they're planning so thoughtfully and so carefully and just they're feeling out the questions of what is the actual meaning besides these things that have these completely abstract prices related to them. And I'm sitting there in this conversation with these 20-somethings figuring out where that landing part is for the meaning, because whatever your parents said to you doesn't really make sense from what they did 40 years ago. Like it's this really confusing part of going, how do I make the meaning for the thing that's under the surface here that I now have to attach a price from? And how do I make sense of that? Because none of it's clicking for them. And it's very, very disorienting. And it was interesting because they're still placing the same value set on, we realize this would be a good idea.
Like home ownership still has the value hook.
Yeah. And partially because they've probably experienced a bunch of rent increases in the last several years and are like, this sucks.
And they've seen their parents
my parents never complained about this.
Right.
They put new siding on, Yeah.
I mean, I wonder if meaning in that sense, it almost feels like it's zero sum because me buying a house means is locking up money to not be able to do other things versus is the meeting something that's actually positive sum, which is I'm doing something that I would have a feeling I wouldn't be able to experience otherwise, spending the same amount of money in theory, but it's not coming off with this, like coming with this 1-for-1 trade-off, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like there's that idea of that, like there's this disconnect between the value and the values in a sense, right? Like there's this, I've been thinking a lot about like Prescient and the American stories and all that stuff that you've been working on, Matt. And there's this whole thing about home ownership and George Bush's ownership society. And like, we have been pushed to be a nation of owners, right? And individual capitalists where we manage our own capital pools, et cetera, et cetera. And I wonder whether or not that value has maintained, but now the thing it's assigned to, i.e. a house, has just gapped too far from like when you're 30 and you can actually think about buying a house, right? I mean, I'm just trying to imagine my kids actually being able to buy a house. And like, I look at like what they're going to make for wages and where they're living and what their housing would actually have to cost. And it's like, okay, so that's going to be 50 to 100 times your annual salary. That's a really tough one to say. And that's what you should go do, you know?
Right. That values versus the value piece, or whichever way you put that in the order, is, I think it's really telling, because back to what Cameron, what you were just saying a minute ago too, of you made some of the stuff better. You made some of the stuff worse too. Using Perplexity for search feels infinitely better than Google, because I've been using Google since the 90s for search, when I chose it over Ask Jeeves or whatever in 1997 and never looked back. But now being able to...
As soon as you never look back and everybody else never looked back, they stop innovated. Ooh, monopoly, right?
Ooh, monopoly. Yeah. And now all of a sudden somebody's innovated and I'm willing to pay for search. Like the idea that I pay 2 separate AIs for different functions in my life for a version of something that I got for free.
Yeah.
That's very disorienting on the value versus the value set. How much, Cameron, do you personally... I don't want to say we're like assigning who the bad actors are, like what's good capitalism versus bad capitalism, but it almost feels like there's a little bit of that judgment thing going on in my head when I'm thinking about this. I don't know how to weigh it or communicate it.
I think that capitalism, where the people who win and then change the rules so nobody else can win, is not capitalism. But there's obviously a lot of that in the US kind of capitalist structure. So the fact that people are getting caught off guard or having to now invest billions of dollars because they probably, and I think we could look back, underinvested potentially billions of dollars over the course of the last few years, that would suggest that Roger McNamee, he had a really great point back. I guess this is after Zucked, before his most recent book. His argument was that as we look at tech monopolies, it's not that we should split them up and say YouTube and Google can't exist together. It's that we should really be asking, should Google search have nearly 50% operating margins? Like, is that an operating margin that reflects something that can't be replicated, or is it an operating margin that reflects a monopoly that needs to be challenged? And should we argue that operating margin should be lowered? And it's the market figuring it out, right? Like, now we're in the state where the market is actually figuring out. It's not by regulation, it's by competition. And so I guess the question would be, is that, are we in a state though where because these companies have so much of the money that they're still able to do the innovation that they're forced to do, and thus they continue to have their monopolies?
I think Herschel Hoffman, whatever the HH index thing that you measure monopoly by, shots have been fired here. Cameron's coming for you. The underinvested idea.
Yeah.
I love that idea. And this is my own bias that I keep tapped down, but I think about it a lot. And Dave, you and I specifically have talked about this, but you made me think about it with your kids. My wife and I moved back to this part of northeastern Pennsylvania in part because cost of living, homes, all these things were cheaper. And we were trying to simplify a bunch of aspects of our lives on top of being near family. So that was the driving force, was family. Second part was, holy crap, it's a lot cheaper than living in big cities and stuff like that. A huge theme here is you can still buy a house well below the national averages. And you can only do that because the people who are living there underinvested in maintenance. So you will buy a friggin' nightmare.
Right. You buy everything's a fixer-upper. Yeah. Like
Everything is a fixer-upper. You could still buy $1 million house here. You do nice stuff if you want, but you could also buy $100,000 house here. There was a house on my block that sold 6, 7, 8 months ago. And like, it's been under renovation since like after the closing. Since the sign came down, there's been a dumpster out front and they've had to gut the thing to studs and they're to catch the whole thing up. And that offset represents the underinvestment in that physical asset. And that poses a really interesting dilemma for people who are looking at stuff. Do the kids need to chase the job, the income, and the thing in those cities, which unfortunately I kind of feel like it's their right to do. And that's a great place to go when you're young.
I mean, look, I know a few folks that have really fallen in love with Detroit for exactly these reasons over the last decade, right? Because it's a young rebuilding community. The music scene's on fire. There's a bunch of tech folks moving in. Like
Detroiters was a great show.
Those things happen kind of naturally, that ebb and flow of where things are underinvested and then where things are overbuilt. But back to your point about like where the monopolies come in on this and like how all of that potential investment is now captured in these larger companies. I do worry that we have entered a world where it's not so much that we have all these monopolies that need to get broken up in a really traditional Standard Oil, AT&T kind of way. It's that they're now all of these multi-business conglomerates where they may not have a prosecutable, Herfindahl index monopoly in any given product, but they now are so huge that they become their own capital markets, right? Which is why nobody goes public. You wait to get bought by Google or Meta or whoever. So these companies become larger and larger. And on the one hand, yay, you can innovate really quickly and deploy a lot of capital, which we've seen, and that can be a net benefit. But boo, on the other side, it means the capital formation is just not happening anymore, right? Everything's a moonshot. And I wonder whether it continuously will exacerbate this top of the food chain problem that you're talking about, Cameron.
At what point does it become the snake that eats its own tail, though, right? So if you underinvest for so long, I think that's one of the reasons why AI has been able to capture the hearts and minds so quickly is part of the reason is because of the degree of underinvestment or only investment in kind of a scrape of getting more revenue out of people through advertising. So it's not necessarily making experiences better. So I think I do wonder if, and we talked about this the last time, you have businesses that are monopolized, very low capital intensity, high return on invested capital businesses that are taking the cash flows from that business and investing it into capital intensive, competitive, lower return on invested capital businesses. And it might not be lighting the cash on fire that you get delivered by DoorDash and Robinhood, but it likely comes with a lower return. And if you have those lower returns, that means then that this arc of earnings growth. I mean, if you look, and I can share it with you guys after, maybe we can put it in the show notes. There's an incredible chart that I put in my weekly charts on Monday, which showed the earnings growth of tech and World X Tech. And since 2007, World X Tech is flat. Flat. And then the World Tech is straight line up.
Yeah.
And so is that indicative of the fact of weak economic growth? Is that indicative of the fact when you have such powerful monopolies that they just gather everything and they're the only ones that can generate this kind of supernormal growth and this concentration? But I think the question for us as investors is that supernormal growth sustainable? The answer may be yes over the next year. Is it sustainable over the next 15 years to the same degree it was over the last 15 years? The answer may be yes, because of everything we're talking about. It may be the nihilistic thing of you just go, if you can't beat them, join them. Just, but I do think it becomes the snake that eats its own tail where they end up shooting themselves in the foot because of the underinvestment. That kind of outperformance typically breeds complacency.
Yeah, and it also feels like it's an accelerant on the societal issues of it too, right? I mean, I did the numbers yesterday. I think yesterday is the day we crossed the mark for 4-year returns being 100% in the S&P 500. Like, so the total returns for the trailing calendar 800 trading days or whatever it is, 100% off the lows when we had our horrible down year where we down 20%, right? Like, which was going to be like the thing that reset us all. Like, That's a weird thing to say, because if you ask most people, do you feel like the country is twice as wealthy as it was 4 years ago? I don't think anybody, no matter how bullish they are, would say, yes, I think America is twice as valuable as it was 4 years ago. That just doesn't feel right. And so when I talk to younger folks who are investing in the market, they see those numbers and they realize they're ridiculous. They realize there is no basis in reality. So it is just a game, right? I think that's where that nihilism comes from. Because to your point, Cameron, yeah, there may be earnings at the top of the tech stack, and that may be what's driving the market numbers. But none of that shows up in food prices, particularly, right? That's not where the investment's going and making any of that stuff better. We know it's not showing up in other kinds of infrastructure investment, whether it's, non-AI data center grid or housing.
When you said I've done the math, I thought you were going to start quoting Schism by Tool. I don't have enough to know the dangers of our second guessing.
Let's get into some odd time signatures then, shall we?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty phenomenal. That point, the 10%, what is it? 10% of earners, like the 10%, top 10% pays for 50% of consumption.
Right.
And like all that math stacks up pretty cleanly and pretty painfully in the most Tool of senses. Like it's a grueling thing to actually look at.
Yeah. And so you know how everybody's been hemming and hawing about how consumer sentiment surveys have been so weak. And we've been saying for years, watch what they do, not what they say, right? The problem is in the spending data, that is weighted. It's a weighted average effectively. And that's why you get 10% generating 50% of consumption.
Right.
But the sentiment surveys, everyone's got the same weight. University of Michigan has somebody online, doesn't, of course we know what their socioeconomic weight is, but they don't get a greater weight in the survey. So each person gets the same, it's like the equal weight index versus the S&P 500. The same is true for voters. Everybody's vote counts the same, even though their dollar of spending or their socioeconomic level doesn't count the same in the aggregate spending data.
So this is what's called the Bill Ackman effect, right? It's like no matter how much money he spends in New York, he still only gets one vote.
And no mayors.
Right. It turns out you cannot buy a mayor.
This is a related...
You want a mayor? I can get you a mayor.
You want a thumb? I can get you. Want a toe? I get you a toe.
Speaking of nihilism, those are nihilists, Donnie.
Those are nihilists, Donnie.
Want a toe? I can get you a toe.
I can get you a mayor in an hour.
Well, Robinhood might be able to do that.
Probably can't. How much does a toe go for? It's got to be less than $100,000.
Depends who's telling. Okay, this is
temperature.
We're way off.
The Rupert Mitchell said this to me the other week, and it's been haunting me inside of this idea of basically the balance sheet composition, especially of U.S. companies, and we look at the AI spend. He's like, the balance sheets are already changing tremendously because instead of just chasing SaaS, now all of a sudden we're looking at physical assets. There's all this stuff that's coming in that's going to change the return on invested capital return profile of these companies, and that pendulum is swinging wildly quickly. And now on top of that, he was pointing out, he just came back from a trip from China. And he was like, if you look at like a Tencent, you look at these companies, like they're spending, maybe thanks to DeepSeek, maybe not. They're like, 10% is going into these fixed costs and this other stuff. They're just assuming they'll do more and they're happy with the manufacturing base that they've set up. That's a really weird thing because to me, I start to go, is US GDP, is the entire US economy just a long AI bet at this point? Like, and what the hell is going on at the company level with who we bet on? Cameron, I see the wheels turning.
So I want to ask you guys a question because this has been something that's been bothering me and I still need to do research on it. So if I'm able to figure out, but you might know. What's been the key reason why all these companies have been able to justify the spending? It's the existential, we need to get to AGI first. But the other key one, and Microsoft will say it a lot, they'll say, well, we are at capacity with compute. There is so much compute demand, we can't meet demand. Have you heard one company come out on their earnings call and say, we were going to move something to the cloud, but Microsoft said that they don't have room for us. There's no more room in the cloud. Like usually when we talk about capacity being constrained. Let's use the example of airlines buying aircraft. You've been in a long period where narrow body aircraft have been capacity constrained. So you get the CEO of Ryanair coming on Bloomberg and saying, "Hey, we need more aircraft, guys. You need to, kick up the production of the A320s and the 737s." Usually when there's capacity constraints, you hear it. You hear it from the customers saying, "Yes, we would do more business if there were more."
So
Wait,
yes,
is that the right question? I don't even know.
it is, but the problem is that where computers being bought now is so dominated by AI spend that's the only place you're hearing it. But you do hear it a lot. Like hop on the Reddits for any of the coding coding subreddits, and you will see every single day, crap, Claude dropped the compute quota for my $2,000 a year plan again without telling me. Like there's a lot of compression on available compute already happening within AI spend. And so I think that's mostly where you're seeing it. But I think where you're really going to see it is electricity. And that's, I think, where you're seeing that show up most dramatically. Lots of national stories about electric prices being impacted by data centers. The flip side, that story about China, Matt, like another story coming out of China from the AI folks has been just the ridiculous amount of overbuild China's done on grid capacity, right? Where they're sitting at over 100% excess reserves in most major metropolitan areas. In the US, we run around 15, right? So there's literally excess 85% power sitting on the ground in China that we're scrambling to build with all that money. 50% of the AI spend is going towards energy right now. 50% of that spend. That's huge.
The whole energy consumption component boggles my mind, especially against the capacity component. Weighted against here in Pennsylvania, there was a thing, one of our nuclear power plants, where the Amazon server farm that lives next to it was just like casually was like, so next year you could just like quintuple our request for energy, right? And the state regulator had to get involved and basically say like, no, you have to say no to this company. You can't give them all that. There's only so much that we have for output. There's only so many things we can do it. And the regulator had to step in and say like, you have to say no to this.
Right.
You can't just turn all these things around. That is a weird other problem that I feel like, Cameron, and maybe this is to your point of figuring out the right question to ask. I don't think that question has become common knowledge in the sense of we all agree we're asking that question yet. And I don't know if it takes electricity rates up another 15, 20 or 1,000% before people go, hey, policymaker, what is actually going on here and how are you addressing this and pitting it against the AI growth strategy? That's weird.
Yeah, because effectively we are all effectively paying a tax for you to continue to earn supernormal profits off of our eyeballs.
Yes. Right. And the challenge is the way the United States structurally handles those imbalances is, and I feel very confident saying this, is not by regulating those industries down in consumption. It's by redistributing back out to the individual in a way to sort of make it okay, right? We've seen this in healthcare too, right? Where instead of solving any of the core problems, you just figure out how to subsidize more and more people, right? So we're just going to end up like most third world countries where most people get an energy subsidy from the government to cover the cost of gas or electricity or whatever. So, if electricity prices spike in Massachusetts by 100%, I will take the bar bet that Massachusetts will have electrical subsidies. Like within a week, because that's what Massachusetts does. Louisiana, probably not. And so we're going to end up with this further bifurcation of where you live determines what kind of subsidies you get to offset this underinvestment in public infrastructure.
Well, that sounds like a good time to hit the Robinhood app, get that cash to myers, and shift.
Get that bag of cash.
Can I just get lottery tickets? Can I get a bag of scratchy rattles?
You just skip the step. Just take my $100,000, go buy scratchers and deliver those to me.
Just deliver me the winnings. All right, so I have a goofy topic that's not related to anything of real consequential value. Does anybody have anything more important they want to kick us off with?
No.
All right. We're post-Halloween by several weeks here. And this was just rattling in my head this morning. I think I saw some Halloween pictures and stuff. I was thinking about the kids. New neighborhood this year. Thrilled with how much the neighborhood turned out for Halloween. We had a ton of trick-or-treaters and it was just pure joy in my month of listening to Misfits songs and thinking about this holiday that I so dearly love. I'm asking best or most memorable Halloween costume that either of you had from youth, childhood, whatever. I have a weird one, but I was thinking about this in asking the nieces and nephews what they were going to be and hearing them talk about it. And I was like, this is a weird thing. Which one is the most memorable to me? Did either of you have a good one? I'll gladly share mine.
I want Cameron's. Go, Cam.
Oh man, I love Halloween as well. And I will never forget as a kid, my mom dresses both my sister and I up as brides, which is weird. Like it's a weird costume.
Yeah.
But in the neighborhood, we had a little Halloween contest, and we'd all do a little parade and this little like common area. And I won the Halloween costume contest, and my sister didn't, even though we were dressed up in the same thing. And it still is like one of those epic family stories. So yeah.
God, that's amazing.
I can't think of a single one of my own costumes, but I can think of every single one my kids wore. So I'm going to punt, and I'm going to say my favorite Halloween costume was the year that my son got lice. And so we convinced him to shave his head and go as Aang from The Last Airbender.
Oh,
with like painted the
Perfect,
blue arrow and the whole 9 yards. It was a baller costume. It was fantastic because he actually shaved his head. He was so into it. And it wasn't until he was like 14 that we let him know that like, actually you had lice. So it wasn't, we gave you this whole spiel about how great your costume was going to be, but it was that, or we were sitting there for a day and a half picking the crap out of your head.
Oh, that's funny.
That's amazing. And a great costume.
And a great
committing to the bit.
Yeah.
Huge
Like,
commitment. Yeah.
So I was thinking about how, and I'm sure I did as a young, like I'm sure I dressed up as some of the, whatever you get at the grocery store, the Target, you get the chintzy plastic, whatever costume. And this is before, I matured into, going in drag for the bulk of like high school and college. And you're like, well, Monty Python and Kids in the Hall told me this was funny, so I should just do lots of that. But I remember as a kid in elementary school, it was a campfire story that my dad would tell us when we would go camping with his college buddies and we'd all be out in the woods with the kids. And it was this like headless lumberjack story. And I remember telling my parents, like, I want to be this. And it's something that no one else knew of aside from like my brothers and like 2 friends. And they didn't go to my school.
Did you go as a headless lumberjack with an axe?
So I'm going to have to ask because I think my mom and dad helped figure this out. But it was like we got an old flannel shirt. There was a piece of like plywood that like sat on the top of my head, like poked 2 eye holes in the shirt. And it was this ridiculous, like severed head, boxy lumberjack thing that we invented from nothing. And I remember just thinking like, this is the coolest thing ever. And then realizing nobody else knew what I was, but being like, you wouldn't understand, but I do.
You would be a great kid with the red bike from Are You Afraid of the Dark? Oh. The scariest Are You Afraid of the Dark episode was the kid with the red bike. Remember the boy with the red bike?
Yeah, yeah.
You could do like a white cast on your face and be dead.
That's
I mean, that.
All right, that might be next year.
How much you want to scare?
Kid with the red bike and Dr. Seuss, the pants with nobody in them. Horribly traumatizing to me. Like you say either of those things, and I just immediate chills. All
right, mine's very similar to yours, Matt, and it'll be very quick too. Which is Thanksgiving is coming up, which is my favorite holiday. And as I was writing this month's zine, I have a little Thanksgiving page in there, and I realized it's also the weirdest holiday because nobody controls it. It's not associated with the church. It's not really a government holiday. Like there's no jingoism around it. It's just kind of whatever your family made Thanksgiving. So my question was, what weird thing says Thanksgiving to you? Like, what does your Thanksgiving tradition that like, well, it's Thanksgiving if ... All
right, I got a weird one for you. Well, Cameron's thinking about this. So Grandma Zeigler, Dad's mom, rest in peace. She, Grandma Joe would, not known for her culinary abilities. Let's just put it that way. There were many, many things for my dad and his siblings that later in life, they were like, I didn't realize I liked this because of the way it was presented to me for the bulk of my life. But we went there for Thanksgiving every year. It was great. They lived not far out of where Penn State is in the center of the country, like lots and lots of great memories of that house and going out there and like playing basketball at the local Penn State campus, like with my grandfather while we're waiting at 10 o'clock in the morning and after the parade and on weird steamy November days when it's not too cold yet and not too hot. So something that always happened that I think about every single Thanksgiving is Grandma Joe would leave. She'd forget something in the kitchen and we'd be like at dessert and like the pumpkin pie and whatever would be on the table. And she'd be like, the creamed onions or something like that makes no sense would come out of like the microwave and you'd have like your pumpkin pie and she'd be like, you have to eat some onions. And you'd be like, A, I'm already full. B, these things do not go together whatsoever.
I love that.
But I feel like there should be a lottery regrettable part of the meal that gets trotted out at an inconvenient time. Because that's part of the, and that we all laugh about it like endlessly and still joke about it to this day.
That's awesome.
I love that.
We're pretty traditional, just traditional food, usually easy breezy day, always stayed home, didn't have other people over. But there was a time when it was very popular in Orlando that people would go shopping on Thanksgiving night because all of the outlets started opening up earlier and earlier and earlier in order to take advantage of the Black Friday rush. And the poor people who had to work this wouldn't be able to have things with their family. But one evening, I had the exchange students from business school and brought them over. And I was like, guys, I'm going to give you America. And I brought them to like this like pre-Black Friday Thanksgiving night. And we like made cocktails and like brought them up in like thermoses and stuff. And like we're part of like the rush of everything and got dropped off for the record. And their eyes are from Mexico and from France. Their eyes were like, what is this? And I was like, look, man, I don't know, but you just got to go for it. And now, of course, those have been outlawed by the outlets because they're like, yeah, this got to be a little bit ridiculous when you're opening at, Thanksgiving Eve.
4 o'clock on Thanksgiving Day. Yeah, no, retail's always been anathema. Like we've always been very anti-retail, no Black Friday sales. The only weird tradition we've had is I had an uncle who passed recently in late in his 80s, and he was always a bit of a rogue. And anytime he was there for Thanksgiving, if anybody ever said something like pass the whatever, it was a food fight. Like pass meant it got thrown. So you had to be careful what you asked him for. Like pass the rolls was usually a pretty safe one. Pass the yams could end up with a... So food fights remain a proud tradition. Not every year, but it definitely is Thanksgiving if somebody throws food across the table.
I like that.
That's fantastic. You have to have something that goes a little bit off the rails to make it a proper tradition.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love the non-commercial framing of it. I guess I hadn't really thought about Hallmark hasn't taken it over. It's still about your degenerate family and whatever your traditions are.
Is it my turn?
Yeah.
Okay.
Fire away, Cameron.
Okay, so we're talking about holidays, and my personal favorite holiday is my grandmother's birthday. She loves her birthday more than anything. And because she loves it so much, we celebrate it for a long time. And my parents started celebrating it a month and a half ago. They go out to dinner. They're like, it's her birthday. And she's turning 98 in a couple of days. And so that's why I'm in Florida to celebrate her birthday. But a few years ago, and this probably like 10 or so years ago, we started this tradition where every year we did a themed party. And the theme involved pretty substantial costumes and food themes and a drink theme and decorations and sometimes activities and games. But what's really powerful about it is that when you have a theme, nothing blends together. You don't necessarily remember exactly what year it was, but you remember the fact that all four of us, my mom, my dad, my grandma, and I were dressed up as the Golden Girls. You remember, my dad was so cute.
Which incidentally, need a picture, but yes.
Yes, pictures incoming. That you remember the fact that we were all wrestlers one year. The fact that this year is Under the Sea themed and Grandma will be dressed up as a mermaid princess. And I think that there's something really special. And we used to even do this on Friday nights as a family, is we would decide on a theme and cook some like a casino night or a steakhouse night, whatever it was. And it makes it so that things just don't blend together. Because in a busy life, everything can become, oh yeah, we went to this nice restaurant, or oh, we went to whatever. We took a trip here or whatever. Not that we take trips, but I think that there's something about inserting novelty where you can, in order to avoid the almost the blurring of the lines that can often happen over the course of the years and in very busy lives.
That's amazing. I love that. I'm going to think about that a lot.
Do you roll like birthday strategy? So birthday strategy is a really interesting thing. Never heard anybody taking it quite that far, which is great. Now I am thinking of in all sorts of ways. Do you have any crazy like non-holiday, forgive me on your grandmother's side, non-national holidays? Trying to figure out how do I frame that?
I'm thinking about writing to the great city of Philadelphia, because she's the biggest Philadelphia sports fan, and be like, and just so you know, you have your longest fan who never misses a Phillies game, never misses an Eagles game. She sits there on her iPad and is like visibly upset when things don't go her way, which as a Phillies fan or a Eagles fan,
all the
it's
time.
Yeah, it's a lot. We got to talk about that one. We got to get them to do something, and especially at 98, I can't tell you how many times we've been to games and like they're trotting out you're like, what is that person doing here in all of like almost a hospital bed or something? And it's because they're there and they're 100 years old, or they're 90 years old or whatever it is, and you're like, that officially becomes the coolest thing ever when you see that, and you're in community with those people celebrating that event.
Yeah,
watch
that's
out,
really
Philadelphia
cool.
sports.
We're kind of anti-birthday people in our household. Like birthdays have never been a big deal. My wife went through a string when we were like in our late 20s or early 30s where something terrible happened on her birthday over and over again. Like several years in a row, it became a bit. And so what I started doing was anytime, and I still do this to this day, anytime I make a reservation for the two of us to go out to a nice romantic restaurant, it's her birthday. Several times a year. You know, so and at this point she sort of feigns being surprised by it, but like by the 100th time somebody comes out with a little cake going, hey, it's your birthday, you know, like, and it's June, not October. She's gotten over it.
That is a fantastic way to do it. Okay, this idea of I'm not trying to crowbar this idea, but I'm really now entranced by this. The novelty, the very personal, small, this is what we and these people around us care about to do. Like, is that part of this whole financial nihilism thing? I am not trying to put a neat bow on this. I just can't help but think the Cash App delivering you $100,000 is actually only great because it's interesting for novelty value, but it's devoid of meaning. You dressing up as like grandma's birthday and just saying we're all committing to this bit together, Dave shaving his kid's head over lights and airbending together. Like, is maybe what we just need? Do we just need more novelty? Do we need more goofy?
I mean,
novelty?
we certainly do live in a weird internet monoculture, right? I mean, it is shocking to me how few things we talk about as a society on a day-to-day basis. Now, it's an infinite number we all can't keep up, but at the same time, nobody knows their local news anymore, right? So it's this bizarre thing where I think we were all very tuned into the 20 big national stories going on, and maybe we care about 10 and folks in another tribe care about another 10, but we still all have the same 20 things that are the thing we're talking about, whether it's Taylor Swift or the AI Morgan Wallen or whatever it is today. But like, you know, we probably don't know what's going on in our city hall election. Like, so I feel like there's a, yes, we need the novelty, but the novelty is already here. We're just not paying attention to it.
What do you think about that, Cameron? And is it, we all have to do it for our own weird group and just not worry about it ever being, is it me in my headless lumberjack costume where it's like, you literally have to not care what the rest of the school thinks?
I think about like how community when I was growing up felt really big. Like being big, meaning that we had, I was part of this thing called the Sunshine Generation, the Razzle Dazzle Nation. But like we had this.
Was that the whole formal title? Just to
Yes,
back that up
yes.
on
This
sound.
sounds very Florida.
It sounds very fun.
Yes,
Can you repeat that one more time?
Sunshine Generation. Yes. But, I think about how,
Up with
there
people.
were 3 families that we were all friends and we were all part of this, and we would spend holidays together, and the fact that like we do these little things that introduce novelty for us as a family almost is because the novelty of the community isn't the same way. And maybe it's because there's so many bounds that are put on of like what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. You got to pay to be part of this community or whatever it is. But I think about it now, even with my nephews, of like they don't have that same kind of novelty of community type events that I had when I was growing up.
Mm.
There's
Yeah.
the weird thing too, the compression of. Oh, you still got the emotions down. This is very
We
important.
had a song called Love in Any Language. I was on the news for it, on the local news, if we're talking about the local news, because I got really emotional. I was like, we had to sign it and the whole thing was great.
That's fantastic.
I'll find it.
Again,
Don't-
need pictures.
Need pictures. We might need to do a times you were on the local news segment. I might have to back pocket that one because I'm
I-
sure.
I got a
times.
couple. I think
I
they're
got
all in
several.
notes, but
Matt, you strike me as somebody who might have had an I like turtles moment.
No, I like turtles moments here.
I
But-
like turtles.
Yeah. Probably got close. I think my highlight moment was, so I graduated when I was in kindergarten. They knew we were going to graduate in the class of 2000, which very amusingly was referred to by the kids in 99 and 01 as you were the class of 0 and you were a bunch of zeros or whatever. So the news crew came to like my kindergarten classroom, and this was like a whole thing. Like, the news is going to be here and you're going to be on the news tonight, and, wear something nice the next day. Like, all that stuff was like beat into our heads as we were maybe entering first grade or whatever. And so like, I'm Z. I'm in the back of the room. I'm like forgettable. I'm like, nothing is going to happen. So right before the commercial break on the news, the cameraman decides like he's going to like zero in on me, but I'm in some itchy sweater or something, and I have something in my eye. So it's like this extended thought while they read me out of me being like, like, what is this?
Future leaders of America.
Yeah, I was like, I'm ruined. It's over from here.
that was it. It was all over for you. It is
It was
totally
all
just
over.
like zombie kid. Like
That
Turtle.
is your I like turtles moment.
That was the closest. That was close to my highlight.
That's the one with the zombie kid, right? With the black eyes and the white face, and oh God, yeah, that's ancient. That's like 20. That's proto-internet.
That is proto-internet. Well, in the interest of clicking beta and not ending this on a nihilist note, Dave Nadig, you're up to all sorts of exciting things. I mean,
ETF.com, baby.
ETF.com all day, every day.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Let's do it. Cameron Dawson, same. I need to go find that note that you referenced. This was
Yeah.
this past
It
week's
was-
note.
well, you can sign up for the Saturday piece and the Monday charts now, I do believe. But if you're not even signed up for them, ping me. I'll get you on the list.
Ping Cameron. I'm going to say check out panoptica.ai. Yes, this week I did compare housing policy to the movie House Party, and I'm still pretty proud of that reference because, well, we didn't make a belt reference in the end. I edited that out selectively. But if you know, you're watching Excess Returns. This is Click Beta. We'll see you real soon.
Thank you for tuning into this episode. If you found this discussion interesting and valuable, please subscribe on your favorite audio platform or on YouTube. You can also follow all the podcasts in the Excess Returns Network at excessreturnspod.com. If you have any feedback or questions, you can contact us at excessreturnspod@gmail.com.
No information on this podcast should be construed as investment advice. Securities discussed in the podcast may be holdings of the firms of the hosts or their clients.